Hi, I'm Kimberly Grant, and this is my reflective journey into what it really means to be an art teacher. This is beyond the syllabus, beyond the standards, and into the heart of what we actually do. My journey as an emerging art teacher. This semester taught me so much more than just classroom strategies and what to do right and how to do them. Through substitute teaching, reading, researching, our discussions, and deep reflection, I started to really define who I am as I'm becoming an art educator. This presentation for me is like a journal. It reflects a piece of me that grew during this time. So just to break up the presentation a little bit to keep it engaging and also share photos and videos of some of my experiences in all of these different classrooms that I've gone to as far as a substitute teacher, elementary, middle, and high school. I wanted to kind of break up the presentation. So throughout the presentation, I'll be including some videos of me talking about those experiences. Hopefully they don't interrupt the presentation too much, but I do wanted to add the element in there so you can see those experiences that I've had. When I did the self-assessment, I realized that I already had a pretty good foundation, not in everything, but some things, especially when it came to the materials, the techniques, and how I work my way through the creative process. I just need to figure out the why and the understanding of what it means to be an art educator. So this is my self-assessment, and I started by going through all of the high school visual arts standards, going through line by line to seeing, how much information I knew or experience I had in it. And after reviewing it, I felt like I needed a lot of help. I needed some training. I need to take some classes. Um, it felt like there's a lot of things I just needed to learn. So I had, some notes and things. It did feel overwhelming. I'm not gonna lie, it did feel really overwhelming. But I said, you know what? You got to start somewhere. So I'll just start by, you know, just start with the one I want to learn the most or have an interest in. My personal goal that I came up with, and I haven't really looked at this in a while. So seeing it now, it's kind of interesting. But my personal goal is to inspire students to use art, creative methods to transform their community in big ways. I don't know what those ways are, but I do believe creativity can be used in all areas of academics and life. I would like art to be used in other ways, art therapy, community events that influence students to spark a change. So when I think about that goal now, it seems really big. And it does seem, I wouldn't say all over the place, but it seems grand. And thinking about it now, and now that I know a little bit more about lesson planning, curriculum, instruction, I went into the classrooms as a substitute with this idea of being kind of like a education scientist, like really thinking about these schools and these classes as my laboratory. When I think about the goal, I think that it's a great goal, but I also think that I don't have to do everything all at once, I guess, if that makes sense. But I do like it, and I do think that in a lot of ways, we covered a lot of these things in the class. And I've looked at some of these things. And when I think about this goal, my personal goal overall, I just want to influence students to use art and those creative skills that they learn in the classroom in their everyday life. And so that can be in the community, that can be to in their career at home, in the classroom, and other classrooms. So yeah, that's my personal goal. That's why I started. These are some of the things that I was trying to figure out what I needed to look at, and I was really trying to just learn everything. But then when I kind of started, going through the process and seeing, I was like, this is a lot of stuff that I have to learn. But what I've learned is I can learn with the students, and if I have that willingness to learn, and if I have that willingness to try, make mistakes, just like my students, then I don't have to know everything. I just have to be willing to learn and being open to that. I also saw myself grow in areas, especially how to build lessons over time, not just one project at a time. I started to think more about, okay, instead of how are we going to complete this project within these certain amount of days, I started to think about, all right, I've taught my students this one technique. How can I integrate it into the next technique? How can I add in the standards? How can I hit all those points? How can I help my students grow and see themselves within this artwork? I started to think of more higher level questions and how I can use those in my day-to-day classroom. The big takeaway for me was that being an art teacher isn't all about what you know or how much you know. It's how you use what you know, how you organize it, and how you can help grow with your students. As a sub this semester, I really started to look at going into the classrooms and the schools as being in an educational laboratory. I stopped looking at it and thinking, okay, what's the culture like at this school? Do I like the environment? I stopped looking at substitute teaching just kind of like an outsider and started to place myself as the teacher in the classroom, as a teacher who possibly could work at the school, as a teacher who could be in this environment and talk with students. And I really started to try to really understand what education is all about and how it impacts everybody. Every classroom had a different vibe, and I could see how much the teacher's energy impacted each space. Every classroom I went to, I could see the teacher reflected in it, the good, the bad, and I could also see how the students were influenced by their
So
teacher.
one class that I signed up for was a health class. For some reason, I thought it was PE, so I wasn't prepared for what I was came into the classroom for. But it was like a nursing kind of career tech type of thing. And there was all these mannequins in the room, and it kind of scared me because I was not expecting that. But just seeing how everything has a purpose, everything is there intentionally and for a practical reason. There was nothing there just to be there. And I don't know, I didn't even see plants, I don't think, in this classroom, but it was just pretty interesting to see how everything's kind of set up. When the students came in, they know where to set, they know what to do, what tools to use, which mannequins to work on, all sorts of things like that.
By their teachers. I saw firsthand how students notice when their teacher is not there. Um, Not just not in the classroom, but emotionally. By seeing and being in the place of the teacher, I saw how much students missed their teachers, um, how they talked about their teachers when their teacher wasn't there. Whether it was good or bad, I realized the students cared and they depended on that teacher and they looked forward to seeing that teacher. No matter what they felt an emptiness when the teacher wasn't there, and it was something they noticed. So I always thought as I'm going to these classrooms, I paid attention to what the students thought of the teacher, how they interacted with the classroom. Did they know their way around the classroom? I really paid attention to a lot of different things. But one thing that really stood out to me is that the students overall miss their teachers. And teaching and teachers, the profession isn't really going anywhere. It may evolve and look different in the future, but it's not going anywhere. Another thing is, I pictured myself in the classroom and I started to take little notes to make sure that I could have some type of toolkit for what I wanted in my classroom. Things like artworks on the wall, things like certain anchor posters, even having lotion in the classroom or tissues, toiletries for the girls, things like that. I really paid attention to the environment of the classroom. I read in an article that good relationships were described as a prerequisite to effective teaching. And a lot of the classrooms that I subbed in, most of the teachers had really good relationships with their students. They could trust their students. And it really set a tone for what I would like to do when I connect with my students, how I want my classroom set up, how I want to create the environment within, my space wherever I'm going. Protectors of creative space. This took me a little while to kind of figure out. When I was a student in art class, I didn't really realize why I liked it so much. It was a safe space. It was a space to have this freedom that you couldn't have in other classrooms. And one thing I know for sure is art teachers protect more than supplies and just kind of, keeping the day-to-day class running. They protect emotional space of students. They protect creative freedom. And students need that. They use art to express what they can't always say out loud, especially in other classrooms or even at home or at their jobs. It's our place as art educators to make room for that and to allow students to be open and honest with themselves, be authentic, and let them know that this space is a creative space. You can experiment, you can play, you can make mistakes. It's all about the learning process. So in the graphic design class, it was an introduction to graphic design class. There was a lot of computers. I didn't get pictures of those, but what interests me is how everything was so organized on the wall. And the teacher had, everything pasted that you needed to know on the wall. So I was able to understand the career pathways. I took pictures of how that works. Also, at this high school, they're on a block schedule some days, and then some days they have flex classes, white days, blue days. So it was very confusing, but she made sure to highlight what substitutes and maybe other teachers needed to know, and herself probably, when the lunch schedules were, and I thought that was really cool. And then also just how the lunch works. So I'm just kind of, as I'm in these classes as a sub, I'm really taking note of what is everywhere, what's on the walls, what is it used for, what's the meaning behind it. In this classroom, she didn't have a lot on the wall, but what she did have was significant. In this classroom, even though the teacher didn't have a lot on the walls, I remember talking with the student that I was interviewing about assessments and feedback and all that stuff. And I remember her talking about how the classroom environment made her feel. It made her feel relaxed, not so stressed. She felt like she can kind of just release tension and just kind of calm down in the classroom. She talked about the lighting, also the personal memorabilia that was in the classroom. It makes it inviting. The teacher had up like her school alma mater flag, also some sports. And the student said it just makes her feel welcome in the class, like she knows a little bit about the teacher. She also said the teacher had a calming presence. And everything was just really relaxed in the class. And when I think about that, I think about how there's not that much things on the wall, but the stuff that's there, the few artwork posters, the memorabilia, the stuff that is there matters. So I think when it comes to classroom decorations and making your students feel welcomed, it's very important to include something about yourself, maybe photos or just a little bit about yourself. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be a lot. But what you do put up there needs to have some type of intention. And that's what this teacher showed. Top articles I read and found interesting. These are articles that have stood out to me after I read them. They just kind of impacted me and influenced me in a way that I don't think I will forget them because of the discussion and the topics that came up. The first one I want to start with is art education and the high school dropout problem. This helped me see the power of art education, and it also helped me realize that art isn't going anywhere. It is very much needed in school. I say that because throughout the semester and some of the projects that we did where I interviewed students and I also interviewed artists and teachers, a lot of times art was that safe space. Art was one of the main reasons why some students came to school. I even spoke with a student who was an adult my age in ceramics class, and they told me that the only reason why they came to school was to do ceramics. That was the only reason. So it makes me think about the high school dropout problem that was mentioned in here. And it basically said it showed that when students stay connected to the arts, they're more likely to stay in school. Now, this just isn't visual arts, it can be dance, it can be theater, but it just reminded me that art is important in school. And it gave me a sense of evidence and support for art education and the future of it. It's very much needed. Another article that I reflected on was Self-Identification in Art by Young. This reminded me of how powerful it is when students see their identity in the art they create. Now, this is not just having, anchor posters or artists that look like them or their culture, that too needs to be in the classroom, showing kind of like a cultural appropriate um, influence around. That needs to be in the classroom. But students need to be able to see themselves in the artwork they create because there's a power in that. It's one thing to create an artwork, based on someone else's idea, but when you really create something of your own, it gives you a sense of self-worth and value. And it boosts your confidence as well. It makes you proud of what you've accomplished. So I think that's really important that they see themselves in the art that they create. Another article that stood out to me, this one is called Interdisciplinary Design Students Studio, and it showed how powerful art is when mixed with other subjects like engineering. This article was based in the college level, but it was really interesting to see how it worked. Art students were brought in to help engineering students solve problems. The engineering students would consult these artists and these art students and be able to solve big real world problems using the creative process, allowing them, the engineers, to unlock sides of themselves and get creative, um, be okay with making mistakes, thinking kind of outside the box, something that artists and art students do all the time, but these engineering students weren't used to that. So that was another thing that allowed me to see that art is very much important and it needs to be integrated into different fields. The interviews, observation, and class takeaways. So I did a couple of interviews, one with um, Mary O'Malley. I also did one with Miss Anderson, a middle school art, or sorry, an elementary art school teacher. I subbed in a elementary school art class and it was half day, so I subbed for the morning and then the teacher came back the second half, and during that time she was really helpful. She actually talked to me. I observed the classroom. She told me what was going on. She gave me like a mini observation interview style type of thing because I told her I was interested in the arts, and she was explaining so much. So I took pictures of what was happening in her classroom. As you can see, everything is organized, but it's a little bit different than the math classrooms. There's a lot to see. There's a lot on the wall, and I just love that. So she has many artworks on the wall, a word wall, and I found this really good because I kept thinking, how can I put vocabulary words on the wall? Like, what does that look like? For a high school classroom, it may look something similar to this, maybe a few words. I don't know yet, but I know that it's possible to have those things now that I have a visual of it. Also, she has books up and so many different like standards and GCPS things around the room. And it's kind of reminds me of how my classroom was a little bit. But some of the books that were there, and I can tell she put a post-it in it so she can go back to those pages. And I just put some things here. Also, this was a kind of a marker. I forgot what it's called, but she would use these to direct students and they would know exactly what to do. So I found that really, really interesting. They knew when it's time to clean up. And so when I was there and I was, working with some of the students, I didn't really know how the flow of things went. I didn't see this till very later. I didn't even know how to use it either. So the students were kind of confused when it was time to clean up. They were waiting on me to direct them or tell them what to do or something. I could tell it was something I was missing. So I just said, let's sing the cleanup song. But then I looked on her desk and I was like, oh, they have a little thing that they use to direct the students. And this is for like the kindergartners and the first graders. Also, I found a rubric that I thought was really interesting, and I would love to use this if I do teach some of the lower grades. But even as a high school art teacher, this having a rubric is really good as well. So these are just some of the things that I found in the art classroom that caught my attention, and I wanted to make sure I remembered. And I just had a really good time in this class. Observations with the Intro to Graphic Design class, and also a couple other classes that I subbed for that were art integrated, or sorry, visual arts class. And then just taking away things that I saw while I subbed in all these different classes from elementary, middle to high school. Listening to real art teachers share their stories was everything. Even though I have, I've talked to a lot of like teachers when I'm subbing, I tend to talk to them and figure out things. And most times they're talking about what's wrong with the school. They're talking about problems with admin, behavior with the students. However, when I talk to the art teachers, they seem to have more empathy and understanding, and they seem to focus more on getting their students to learn, focusing on the art, and being really encouraging. And I found that really interesting. Now, it's not to say all the other teachers in the subjects with other who taught other subjects that I taught were just talked about, the behavior and all that, but almost all, if actually all of the art teachers that I talked to were very positive. They were very encouraging, and rather than talking about what was wrong, they were trying to find solutions and just work through things. So I found that really interesting. Another thing is observing the teaching styles. Art is more relaxed, and they have different approaches to managing the classroom. And they seem very passionate about what they do. Now, this isn't just the art teachers. When I would go into certain classes, whether it be math, science, or just an elementary classroom, special education resource classroom, what I notice is if I go in the classroom and it's, decorated, it has student-friendly things, it's student-centered, um, and you can kind of tell the teacher is passionate about what they do, not just by the decorations, but how the students kind of talk about them. That passion is reflected in the students. You can sense it, you can feel it. They miss their teacher. So that was kind of interesting. And you kind of get an idea of what the teacher does and doesn't do, the respect the students show you. It's all reflected and it all bounces off of each other. So it's pretty interesting. Teachers who were perceived as passionate and caring created environments where students were more willing to take academic risk. I really learned that in my essential question 4, where I interviewed a bunch of graphic design students. They really spoke highly of their teacher. It wasn't so much what she was teaching, it was how she was teaching, how she listened, how she boosted their confidence, how she never saw the wrong in what they did, but offered solutions. So I was just looking at different things around the classroom and really paying attention to what's there intentionally, what is in the classroom based on what the teacher likes. And I'm really just observing and just taking notes. I also took pictures of the classroom. These are some anchor posters. This is how the teacher decorated everything, and everything up there had some type of meaning. I didn't really see anything up there that didn't need to be, just, that was just there for the sake of being there. And now it starts to make sense. When I had my own classroom, some stuff I would just put up because it was already in a classroom and I didn't want to throw it away. So I tried to make it look decorative. And some things were, students' artworks, but I just see now the intention behind some of the things that are on the wall. When I did have a classroom, I didn't have very many anchor posters up. I don't even think I had any. It was more class expectations and student artwork. So now looking at these things, I'm seeing how important it is. It creates a learning environment vibe. And it lets the students know you're here to learn. So this is just how the classroom is set up and everything is very organized. I did notice too in science, math classrooms, especially computer classrooms, everything is very well organized and ordered. There's no crooked posters. Everything is just laid out very well. When you go to social studies, art, I'm trying to think of the other classrooms, literature classrooms, things are kind of all over the wall. There's no real order. So I found that really interesting. I wonder if I didn't meet all these teachers, so I wonder if it has to do with personality or just, that it's math and science and it's very organized in that way. So I found that really interesting too. Everything's written on the board, everything's clear. So I really like this. I really just, thinking about the things that I learned in the classroom and some of my other classrooms, I really started to pay attention to why are things where they are? What is the purpose? Why does it need to be there? Some of these notes are actually the teacher's notes, some of these really small ones, the big ones are for the students. So it was really interesting to really just start to pay attention and think like a teacher. Um, Art standards. Things started to click for me why art standards are so important. At first, I didn't get really why standards were such a big deal, and I didn't really understand the connections. I just saw, okay, these are guidelines we have to go by. And so I felt distant from art standards. I couldn't relate. Even reading them felt, you know, it didn't feel natural. It just felt like bureaucracy. However, while working on Essential Question 2, it started to click with why standards are so important. And this is important that I mention this because this is a part of my growth and understanding the importance and the significance of art standards. Standards give us a shared language and they help teachers across the country stay connected. When I was looking up information for how to build a syllabus or a scope and sequence or how to do certain things or what materials to use, the standards connected everything, which is the creating, presenting, responding, and connecting, which is a part of the National Core Standards for Arts. So, there's a reason now I can read a syllabus or a pacing guide and actually understand the flow of it and why it's presented in that way, why it's written in that way, because of those standards connect everything. So I can look at a school across the country and pull their syllabus. And if they are using, and most likely they are using the core standards, I can see where it's coming from and how it all connects together. Um, and it also helps, the standards also help us focus on what's really important, and that's student growth and development. And also keeping the teachers focused and aligned with something that we know works because many people came together to create these standards. Why art teachers matter? Well, it fosters creativity, builds confidence, fosters problem solving, the human experience, and it's a low stress environment. What we do is more than just teach. We help students think, reflect, feel, imagine, and try again when they make mistakes. We also offer a space with fewer tests and more trust. Now, with the fewer tests, I used to think that us art teachers not having standardized tests was something that can be looked at as like a weakness or something that's, a check mark against us. But I realized, no, it's not. It's one of the few places where students can create without those barriers there, what feels like a wall or a barrier of having to have these assessments, these standardized assessments. It's one of the few places where students can just freely learn without having to feel the pressure of those tests. And I think that's an advantage. I think because expression is welcomed and encouraged. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is the human experience. This is something that I discovered when I redid my timeline and as I'm looking at just how things are changing. At first, I was kind of discouraged by the political aspects of what's going on and could art education be in danger and also the use of AI and the art that's coming out. And I was a little apprehensive or nervous about where the future of art education would go. But then I realized people always create art, humans always create art. And it's something that I don't think will ever go away. And I actually think more people are going to get involved with art and creating things. So it's all about the human experience. And this is encouraging students to process emotion, culture, identity, and most importantly, too, their imagination. So these are some pictures from the ceramics class that I took, and I just want to share those with you. So the story behind this, the first class, what the teacher had us do was get on the wheel, and we were making three pieces. So this is the first piece. This is the second one, which is a bowl, and then the third one. And not exactly in this order. Now that I think about it, we did the plate first, and then I did a bowl. But this bowl is actually supposed to be larger. As I was shaping it, I noticed the sides were getting a little bit thinner, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. So a teacher's assistant came over to help me, and she was trying to like fix the issue with me. We were both, having our hands on it, and she would put her hands on the wheel, guide me. I would put my hands on the wheel, and then it collapsed. So what I have left is this piece, which I find actually pretty nice. It's pretty interesting, but it's really small. And also, this is another bowl. Even though the first bowl came out really tiny and I made some mistakes and things like that, it basically fell apart. I decided to try again. And I was like, oh, okay, I got this. Now, it wasn't the best looking bowl, but it was actually kind of cool. And this is it right here. So, yeah, it turned out actually really nice. This is the small bowl. So, as you can see, this one was a tiny mistake, but I actually like it. I don't know what to put in it yet, but it's really nice. But this is where it was supposed to be. So, I just tried it again. Worked out well. This is the plate that I made. And after seeing the final product and seeing it come out the way it did, it was like magic. I never made ceramics before like this. So I was kind of in shock, like, oh my gosh, these are my babies. I also did a hand building one where you had to coil and then you press it, and the teacher was guiding me and showing me how to do it. And sometimes I press too lightly, press too hard. It's all about pressure and timing and patience and just knowing how to move your hands. And my hands were not used to moving in those kind of ways. So it was kind of painful the next day, but it was really, really fun. And this is the end product. And I seriously thought that it was going to come out like broken or smashed or because it had a lot of cracks in it. But somehow, some way, it just came out this way. Now I know there's a science behind it. I haven't researched that yet, but yeah, that's the ceramics class, and I just want to show the finished products of that. There's this place called Threaded to Heaven that offers fiber arts like class. So they do crochet, they do sewing, fashion design. And fashion design and fiber arts like crochet and things like that are in the curriculum. So I thought, why not take a class and see what's going on? At first, I didn't expect much from the class because I was like, I can make a pillow, like this is no big deal. But I started thinking as an educator and really paying attention to how the teacher was teaching class. And I started to pick out little nuggets of information that I'm like, oh, I am learning, or I never knew that. So it was really interesting how she kind of commanded the class. And it was also interesting to see how her teaching style was different from the ceramics teacher, was different from some of the other art teachers that I saw, was different from the elementary school teachers. It's just a different dynamic, a different flow. And it's almost like their personalities and their passion for what they do was shining through into their teaching as they're telling us what to do. So out of all the classes that I've taken, this class was a lot slower. So I don't know if it was because it was beginner or what, but I noticed the pacing of the teacher, the way she talked, the way she explained herself. She was very particular. She really took her time with her words. And she was extremely patient. So it was interesting. She broke everything down piece by piece. I think she did that because in when you're, sewing and creating things, fabric is expensive. You don't want to create too much waste. So she's really taking her time to make sure you get it right the first time if you can, because it's so painstaking to create these things. I would love to take a fashion design course. I would love to teach one, but I don't know. I don't find much pleasure in the actual creating, like the sewing part of it. But the drawing and stuff, I love that part. So this was, it was hard to make. So this is the pillow I created. It took us 2 days to make a pillow. Um, and I'm still not done. So, but I will say this, she did show us the proper way to make a pillow, not just cutting out some squares. She showed us how to use the tools properly. So I learned a lot in this class, way more than I thought, as a student. Um, she taught me patience and she taught me how to talk clear and direct and how to let your passion shine through. And for some reason, we always finished on time. I never thought we'd finish on time, but we always did. So her patience was on a whole nother level. What does it mean to be an art teacher? To be an art teacher is to be a protector of possibility. Art teachers create safe spaces where students feel seen, heard, and empowered to take creative risk. A couple of quotes I want to read is students respond better when they feel the teacher genuinely cares about them. Engaging teaching practices relied less on rigid control and more on providing students with autonomy, respect, and intellectual challenge. To be an art teacher is to be someone who says, yes, try this, do this, experiment with that, learn from this, and not have to worry about is it right or is it wrong? I want to be able to help students take risk and guide them to think critically and to see beyond the grades and the projects. It's all about the process, I think, and building and learning through that space. And I think art classes and art teachers are vessels, are spaces to imagine for students in a way that they may not be able to anywhere else. And sometimes I think it's like our last line of defense to creativity, but art education and teachers are very much needed. Thank you.